Something is quietly building in the Middle East, and most people aren't paying attention yet. Israel has never fully stepped back from Lebanon. The ceasefire held, but only on the surface. Beneath it, military movements continued, intelligence operations expanded, and Netanyahu, facing enormous domestic pressure,
has been making calculations that few outside his inner circle fully understand. Here is what concerns serious analysts right now.
That the conditions that ended the last war have not been resolved. They've been postponed. And when the underlying causes of a conflict are merely delayed and not dismantled, history tells us one thing with remarkable consistency. The fire doesn't go out, it waits. What we are watching unfold right now may not be preparation for war. It may be the opening move of one already decided. Here is the core argument stated plainly, without dramatization. Israel is not done with Lebanon. And the current pause in fighting is not peace, it is positioning. Netanyahu's government has made a strategic calculation that Hezbollah, weakened but not destroyed, remains an existential threat to Israel's northern border. The logic in Tel Aviv is straightforward.
A damaged Hezbollah is a vulnerable Hezbollah, and vulnerability has a shelf life.
If Hezbollah's capabilities now, while the window is open, that window will close. Hezbollah will rearm. Iran will resupply. And the threat will return larger, more entrenched, and harder to remove. But here's what most people don't realize. This isn't simply a military decision. It is a political one. This is the thinking driving what analysts are calling Netanyahu's most dangerous gamble yet. It silences domestic opposition and frames him, once again, as a wartime leader, a leader you cannot remove during a crisis. That intersection between genuine security calculation and raw political survival is what makes this moment so combustible. The question is no longer whether Israel will escalate in Lebanon. The question is what form that escalation takes, how far it goes, and whether the region and the world is prepared for what comes next. Most are not. To understand what is happening now, you need to understand what happened before and why the 2024 ceasefire was always fragile by design. For decades, Hezbollah has operated as Iran's most powerful proxy force in the Arab world. It is not simply a militia. It is a state within a state, with its own military command, its own intelligence apparatus, its own political wing, seated inside the Lebanese parliament. At its peak, Hezbollah possessed more precision rockets than most standing armies in the region. It controlled territory. It controlled supply routes. And it answered ultimately to Tehran. Israel and Hezbollah fought a significant war in 2006. That conflict ended without a decisive outcome. Hezbollah claimed victory simply by surviving. Israel withdrew without achieving its stated objectives. And in the years that followed, Hezbollah grew stronger, not weaker. Then came October 2023, and within days, Hezbollah began firing rockets from the north, opening a second front. Israel found itself managing simultaneous threats across two borders. Northern Israeli communities were evacuated, tens of thousands of civilians displaced. The psychological and military pressure was immense. By late 2024, Israel launched a serious ground and air campaign into southern Lebanon, targeting Hezbollah's command structure, eliminating key leadership, and degrading significant portions of its arsenal. Senior commanders were killed. Supply lines were disrupted, and degrading significant portions of its arsenal. Senior commanders were killed. Supply lines were disrupted. The organization was genuinely shaken. A ceasefire was brokered. But the terms were never fully implemented. Hezbollah did not fully withdraw. Israeli forces did not fully pull back. And the fundamental question, who controls southern Lebanon, was left deliberately unanswered. That unanswered question is the fault line everything else is built upon. And fault lines, under enough pressure, do not stay quiet forever. Now let's break this down into what is actually happening beneath the surface, because the full picture is more complex than headlines suggest. The first point is this: Israel's military doctrine has fundamentally shifted. After October 2023, the Israeli defense establishment concluded that deterrence alone is no longer sufficient. The old strategy, strike when attacked, could then return to equilibrium, failed catastrophically on that morning. What replaced it is something more aggressive, a doctrine of preemptive degradation. Strike before the threat fully reconstitutes. Don't wait for the next attack. Eliminate the capability before it is used. That shift in doctrine is what makes another Lebanon operation eliminate the capability before it is used. That shift in doctrine is what makes another Lebanon operation not just possible, but within Israeli strategic thinking, logical. The second point is Iran. And this is where things get interesting. Every calculation Israel makes about Hezbollah is simultaneously a calculation about Tehran. Hezbollah is Iran's forward deterrent, in its way of threatening Israel without firing a single Iranian missile directly. When Israel strikes Hezbollah, when it is not just fighting a Lebanese militia, it is sending a message to Iran about the cost of proxy warfare. But Iran is not passive. Every significant Israeli strike into Lebanon risks triggering a response calibrated in Tehran, not Beirut. That escalation ladder has no clear top rung. The third point, and this is what most analysts are quietly discussing, is Lebanon itself. The Lebanese state is effectively collapsed. There is no functioning government capable of controlling Hezbollah or negotiating meaningfully with Israel, which means there is no diplomatic off-ramp that doesn't require one of the armed parties to voluntarily step back. And neither side has shown any intention of doing so. When you combine a shifted Israeli doctrine with an emboldened Iran and a collapsed Lebanese state, and you are not looking at conditions for peace. You are looking at conditions for escalation, dressed in the language of ceasefire. So where does this go from here? Let's walk through the most likely possibilities, because not all escalations end the same way. The first scenario is a targeted Israeli operation Triton, limited, surgical, and framed publicly as a defensive necessity. If Hezbollah crosses a specific threshold place, a significant rocket barrage, an attempted cross-border infiltration, an attack on a returning northern community Talon, Israel uses that trigger to launch a focused campaign. It targets weapons depots, command centers, and newly rebuilt infrastructure in southern Lebanon. The operation lasts weeks, not months. International pressure mounts quickly. A second ceasefire is negotiated again without resolving the fundamental question of control. The cycle resets. And in 2 or 3 years, we have this same conversation again, except with higher stakes. The second scenario is a broader war, Kleis, one that neither side fully intended, but neither side was willing to prevent.
If Israel strikes deeper into Lebanese territory, targeting Hezbollah's political infrastructure or assets near Beirut,
Hezbollah responds with a sustained missile campaign against Israeli cities. Iran reads the moment as existential for its proxy network and increases direct support. Regional actors are forced to choose sides. The conflict expands beyond a bilateral exchange and becomes something far harder to contain. This is the scenario that keeps analysts awake at night. Not because it is inevitable, but because the conditions for it are already present. The third scenario, to say the least likely but worth naming, is genuine diplomatic movement. A third-party framework, possibly involving the United States, France, and Gulf actors, creates enough pressure on both Hezbollah and Israel to enforce the original ceasefire terms properly. Weapons are restricted. Buffer zones are actually monitored. But this scenario requires political will that, right now, does not visibly exist on any side. And that absence of political will is perhaps the most dangerous fact of all. Here is what Here is what I want you to take away from everything we have discussed today.
The Middle East does not escalate suddenly. It escalates gradually, through small decisions,
delayed responses,
and miscalculations that each seem manageable in isolation. What makes the current moment genuinely dangerous is not one single action by Israel or Hezbollah. And Lebanon sits at the center of this fortune, not as a powerful actor, but as a broken one. A country too weak to control its own territory, too divided to speak with one voice, and too fragile to absorb another war without complete collapse. If fighting restarts at scale,
It is the Lebanese civilian population that pays the highest price. That is not speculation. That is history, repeating with brutal consistency. The world is watching Gaza. It is watching Ukraine. It is watching tensions across the Taiwan Strait. And precisely because attention is stretched thin, the space for miscalculation in Lebanon grows wider. What happens in the next few months? In that narrow strip of land between Israel and Lebanon may not stay there. It rarely does.